Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some phrases paint such a vivid picture in your mind, while others just sound, well, normal? Today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of metaphors and how our brains actually process them, or as the researchers put it, the format of metaphorical meaning. Imagine someone says, "She is a ray of sunshine." You probably don't picture the physics of light. Instead, you get a feeling of warmth, happiness, and brightness, right? But how does that happen in our brains? Do we create an actual mental image of sunshine beaming down, or is it all just abstract ideas? This study tackled that exact question. It's a big debate in psychology. Are abstract ideas represented as plain words and concepts, or are they tied to our senses and experiences, like images or sounds? The researchers wanted to see if metaphors create mental images similar to when we intentionally try to imagine something, or if they're mostly just handled as plain, abstract information. They designed a really clever experiment. They showed people a picture, but before they saw the picture, they were given one of four things: another picture, a word that asks you to imagine something, a literal sentence describing the picture, or a metaphorical sentence that describes the same idea but in a figurative way. Then they looked at brain activity using EEG, which measures electrical signals in the brain. The big question was, would the brain activity for metaphors look more like the activity for actual imagination, or more like the activity for understanding a regular sentence? So how did they actually do this? They recruited 41 people and hooked them up to an EEG machine, which has lots of little sensors on the scalp. They used a bunch of different tasks. In the first task, called the physical task, they'd see one picture, then another, and decide if they matched. This was kind of like a baseline. In the imagery tasks, they'd see a word like uncombed and would be asked to imagine someone with that characteristic during a pause. Then they'd see a picture and decide if it matched their imagined person. The literal task involved seeing a sentence like "that surgeon is brutal" and then a picture to match. Finally, the metaphorical task used sentences like "that surgeon is a butcher" and then a picture. The real magic here is that they use pictures of the complete figurative idea. So for "surgeon is a butcher," the picture would show a surgeon acting roughly or brutally, not just a butcher cleaving meat. They were looking at brainwaves, specifically changes in electrical signals, right after the target picture appeared. They analyzed brain activity in a few ways. First, they looked at event-related potentials, or ERPs. Think of these as snapshots of brain activity happening at specific moments after a stimulus. Like the target picture, they were particularly interested in early brain responses around the P300 and N200 signals. The P300 is often linked to recognizing something familiar or confirming an expectation, and the N200 can be related to processing unexpected or novel information. They also did a cool thing called source estimation to pinpoint where in the brain these signals were coming from. And finally, they looked at brain waves in different frequency bands, what they call time. Frequency analysis to see how different parts of the brain were communicating. And here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers found that when people processed metaphors, their brain activity looked a lot more like when they were actively imagining something than when they were reading a literal sentence. Specifically, in the early moments after seeing the picture, metaphors triggered a bigger P300 signal compared to literal descriptions. This suggests that metaphors create a stronger, more vivid mental representation that helps confirm what they're seeing in the picture. Much like when you successfully imagine something. This was also supported by the source analysis. They saw more activity in visual processing areas of the brain, the parts usually involved in seeing and imagining, when people processed metaphors compared to literal sentences. It's like the metaphor was actually painting a picture in their minds. This difference between metaphors and literal sentences also came up in the time frequency analysis. There was more desynchronization in the alpha and beta brainwave bands for metaphors. Without getting too technical, this is often associated with integrating information and processing complex mental images. It seems like metaphors are making the brain work harder to create that visual representation of the figurative meaning. The study also found that people who are naturally better at vivid mental imagery showed smaller differences between the metaphor and literal conditions. This suggests that if you are already good at imagining things, your brain might be leaning on those imagery skills even when processing literal language. Blurring the lines a bit, individual differences in vocabulary also played a role, showing that people can flexibly use different cognitive tools depending on their strength. But here is a crucial twist. While metaphors seem to engage imagery, they aren't exactly the same as pure imagination. The researchers found that even though metaphors showed imagery like patterns early on, later in the processing, there were differences. In later stages, the brain activity for metaphors diverged from the activity for the pure imagery task. For example, in the imagery-only task, there were stronger brain signals related to memory retrieval and holding on to information, suggesting more effort was needed for those purely imagined scenarios. The researchers propose that metaphors provide a kind of propositional scaffold. The words themselves give structure and direction to the mental image. This means metaphors might be creating a richer, more integrated representation than just a standalone mental image. The literal sentence gives a clear, direct meaning, and the metaphor gives a rich, based meaning that is still guided by language. So, what does this all mean? Well, it strongly supports the idea that metaphors aren't just abstract word games. They genuinely tap into our visual and sensory systems, creating mental images that reflect the figurative meaning. This aligns with multiple representation theories in psychology, which suggest our understanding of concepts isn't just stored in one place, but comes from a dynamic interaction of different brain systems, what we see, what we feel, and the abstract words themselves. Metaphors are special because they force our brains to create something new, a new conceptual space that's grounded in our experiences. They help set things before the eyes, as Aristotle put it, but not by replacing words with pictures. Instead, they weave together the visual simulation with the propositional meaning in a flexible way. Of course, no study is perfect. The researchers themselves pointed out a couple of things. For one, the pictures were repeated across tasks, which might have made people a bit too used to seeing them, possibly influencing their imagery responses. Also, the very act of asking them to match pictures might have encouraged visual imagery more than normal metaphor comprehension does in everyday life when we're not expecting a picture. Future studies might explore this with different types of tasks like simple judgments, or by looking at people who have challenges with mental imagery. And while EEG is great for timing, it is not perfect for pinpointing exact locations in the brain, so fMRI studies could offer more precise insights in the future. But even with these limitations, the findings are pretty compelling. They tell us that when we understand the metaphor, our brains are quite literally creating a picture. It is not an abstract translation of words, but a vivid, image-based simulation that is guided and constrained by the language itself. This research really highlights the incredible flexibility and richness of our minds and how we construct meaning by drawing on all our different cognitive tools. It is a beautiful reminder that language is not just about what we say, but about the worlds we create in our minds when we communicate. If you found this exploration of metaphor mind-blowing, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what your favorite metaphor is, or if you ever literally picture things when you hear certain phrases. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next dive into the fascinating world of the human mind. Thanks for watching RUBIN'S Mind Lab. Stay curious.